Hello and welcome back to the show. I am super excited for today's episode because we're going to be sitting here today with our guest, Curtis Garner, the founder of the YouTube channel PE turned RE. And Curtis is a real estate investor, a house hacker, and a teacher and coach at a school district in Washington State. So Curtis is not just a real estate investor, but he's also pretty involved in the teaching and coaching space as well. So we're going to be getting Curtis's opinions and his insights into his journey in real estate, but also kind of what he's seeing on the education space as well as financial education on how everybody can start building wealth in their own lives as well. So Curtis, welcome to the show, man. I'm super excited to have you join us here today.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you for having me. And if you hear any bells, it's just school just got out. And so if you hear anything like that, uh, hopefully it's done. But
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. So you guys can see, Curtis is, working hard and getting out there even during his day job as well. And that's kind of what I wanted to have you share a little bit with us here today is, how did you get into real estate investing? I personally heard some of your stories as far as, house hacking and getting started and being able to juggle everything at once. But I'd love for you to be able to share a little bit on how you got started and kind of where you are led to here today.
yeah, so we're going to look back at 2020. Is when I was a senior in college and pandemic happened. And the things I had thought I was going to do was kind of put on hold. I thought I was going to go work in college athletics and work kind of in admin and coach. Well, all the interviews I had lined up, I said, is there going to be sports? They're like, well, we don't know, this COVID thing. I said, okay. So I knew teaching was something that I was good at and had a passion for. And I knew no matter what, I would have a job because my first year at teaching was all on Zoom. And so I was like, okay, cool. And so my first year, I was actually a part-time teacher. I was a point six. So if you think teachers don't get paid a lot, imagine being a part-time teacher. And I lived at my mom's house. And so I taught from there. Luckily, me and her have a great relationship, and me and the family are close, so it was no biggie. And I stayed there just over 2 years, like maybe 2 years right on the mark. And the plan was for me to save up and buy like a duplex or buy some type of thing that I could house hack. If it was a single like family, like in my area, there's lots of places that have like basements or ADUs. So I was open to that realm too. I eventually got a duplex in Tacoma, about an hour south of Seattle. And I was able to really super house hack it. And I think that's maybe part of the story that you heard is the part I house hacked, I didn't have a shower or a kitchen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting to hear that story, right? Because a lot of people don't they think of house hacking and they think, getting into real estate investing is something that it's not necessarily they can do, right? But you've proven that you can do that and the sacrifices that you've made in order to start building wealth. So kind of walk us through that if you don't mind, what was it that kind of prompted you to be able to sacrifice what you have to begin house hacking and start that wealth building journey that you're on currently?
Yeah, so even though my first year we're mostly on Zoom, I think the second half of the year we started to come in like do like a hybrid mix thing. But I was seeing the teachers that have taught for decades and talking to coaches in the district that I've coached for a very long time and kind of hearing them talk about retirement as this age. And oh God, I don't want to wait till I'm 65 or have X amount of years in the district and seeing kind of not how they were kind of like salty or they're negative like about it. I said, oh, okay, that can't be me. So what's a tangible way that I can build my retirement? And if I continue to teach or coach, it's by choice, not because I have to. And so I was looking at all the options, building a business. Well, that's kind of tough. I work at the school. Like, how am I about to run the business and teach a class? And then I was like, okay, stocks. Okay. If I save X amount of dollars, how long would it take me to build the portfolio I would need to safely pull from it? Well, it'll take forever on a teacher salary. So I said, okay, the only option is the real estate. I heard you can leverage. I heard you can build a little bit faster. So I said, okay, that is the way. And for the first house hack, I did FHA loan, which you only need 3.5% down, in which now that there's a conventional product, I would recommend people go with that one, and we can go more into why. But my first one was FHA, and cash to close was only like 15,000 for a $440,000 duplex.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good, right? People don't understand you can start out that way. So you mentioned, you started with FHA, but now you're kind of recommending people go into conventional. Could you explain the reason for that and
Yeah.
how much they should be expecting to put up, and what
Mhm.
are some things that they should be prepared to as far as preparing to actually start investing in house hacking and real estate?
Yeah, so if you are brand new and you see FHA is only 3.5%, you're probably, oh wow, that's probably a great deal. And it is if you have like lower credit or something that kind of dings you a little bit from an applicant standpoint for loans. However, conventional is 5%, which is slightly more. However, the PMI, or the private mortgage insurance, that you have to pay every month, actually drops off once you reach about 20% of equity in the property. Whereas FHA, it stays on there for the life of the loan, no matter how much equity that you have. And if you want to use FH again, you have to refinance, which may not be good depending on what your rate is.
Right. So you're trying to get the best, like the best deal, right? As far
Mhm.
as being able to get into real estate. And I think a lot of people want to be able to do that, right? They want to be able to start really with as little as possible. I think, is that something that you've kind of seen as well as you kind of talk to other investors? And was that kind of the position that you were in as well? Kind of as you were telling your story, that's kind of what I've gathered as well.
Yeah, yeah. The first year being a part-time teacher, then year two being a full-time teacher, not the highest pay there, and not really a ability to scale my pay up, right? And then my family's not rich, so I couldn't get a big gift for a down payment either. So the only way for me in, and for a lot of people, I think, is that house hack, kind of that low percent down.
Yeah. So I want to kind of talk about your experience in house hacking a little bit, right? You mentioned that you didn't have a shower, right, in the beginning, and
Yeah.
you don't have a kitchen as well. So has that problem been solved? First and foremost, I want to ask that question.
Yes, so that problem was solved. I actually splurged a little bit on this next house hack. I have a shower and I have a kitchen, and so life is good.
Nice. I'm glad you were able to get that resolved. But kind of talk up through that a little bit, right? Was it as difficult as people make it out to be, as far as when they hear that, right? From the outside looking in, they hear, oh wow, I mean, if I'm house hacking, I got to give up, a shower. I don't have a kitchen. How am I going to live for this next couple of years until I get into a newer house and start building that equity? How did that actually look from a reality perspective that you've actually lived through that?
Yeah, and like I tell people, if there was a spectrum of house hacking, I'm on the extreme side of it, and I can recognize that. So just kind of give people a visual of what this house hack was so they can really understand. Is it was a traditional, like, side by side duplex. And the side that I was on was a 3 bedroom, 1.5 bath. Well, the primary suite had its own exterior door, and was kind of, I could seal it off from the rest of the house. So that's kind of what I did. I didn't really want the roommates. I had them in college. I said, I don't really want them now. And so I sealed it off from the rest of the house. So that way the tenants that took the other 2 bedrooms, I could advertise it as, hey, I do live in the property, but we don't have to interact at all. The only time we might interact is when we go park our cars. And so it wasn't necessarily the easiest because, again, there's no shower there, but that issue was resolved because my office at my work, there's a shower there. There's a shower at my mom's house. There's a shower at the gym. So all places that I go, showering is always an option, except at home.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? It's the one place you can't actually utilize the showers at your home.
Yeah, and then the kitchen, it really wasn't that bad because I figured out that I could put a microwave. I made like a little kitchenette area. So I could have a microwave and I could have an air fryer there. Though, if you do something like this where you seal off a part of the house, run all your tests before you put tenants in. So I had to figure out what I could all have plugged in without flipping the breaker, because the breaker was on the tenant side. And I would hate to have to bug them because I was doing too much stuff, right? So those are some tests that you could run. And so I figured out, okay, you can have the air fryer on or the microwave, not both at the same time.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So you had to figure out some of these things, right? Some lessons learned, if you will,
Yeah.
right, from the first time house hacking that I think is going to be valuable for a lot of people if that's the direction that they want to go in. But
Mhm.
it's very cool that you're able to do that because I don't think a lot of people give themselves enough credit to be able to go out there and start and be able to problem solve, if that makes sense, because that's what you were able to do, is from what I'm hearing. You were able to figure out how you can resolve the issues or potential issues that you have with not having a shower, not having necessarily a kitchen area, but still being able to survive. I mean, you look great, right? You're still here and alive, right? You didn't die. So, is that something you would recommend other people out there? Is just try to figure out ways to solve problems. And if you are committed to building wealth, whether if it's through real estate or building a business, you really have to commit. And there's going to be sacrifices involved, but you kind of have to figure things out along the way.
Yeah, you definitely have to figure things out and also figure out what is in your toolbox now. Like at the time I was 24, I was single, I had no kids, I had no pets, right? So a lot of the things that some people use as reasons that they can't do it, I didn't have those. So I don't need a big yard, I don't need space because I don't have those extra dependents that need those things. And so I was able to kind of make do. Now, when I tell people this, they're like, okay, well, I have a girlfriend or a wife or a spouse or whatever. I don't think that we can do that. They're probably right, because the amount of space that I was like living in was about 200 square feet if I round up, so very tiny. But they people in those spots, they don't necessarily have to seal up their room. They could get a roommate or two, right? Because if there's three bedrooms, how many bedrooms do you actually truly need? And so just figure out what you can do instead of focusing on what you can't do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that what you just said there, right? Focus on what you can do because everybody has their own excuse, but
Mhm.
everybody has a unique situation that they can then take advantage of and have it work in your favor, right? You mentioned that, you're being a younger person, being single, not having a lot of life liabilities. That is what you focused on, whereas somebody else who might be in the exact situation that you're in could use all of those reasons as excuses why they can't get into real estate investing.
Mhm. Yeah, because we hear about these dual income, no kids, in which like that's great. Like if you look at PTO for life, right? Two people, same goal, two incomes, probably a little easier for them, which is awesome. But there's other people that are also married, but they don't take that step because they're not willing to take a step back to take that step ahead, actually.
Yes, of course. So like people have to understand that, right? So sometimes when you're, thinking of building something forward, you have to
Mhm.
try to take a step back, and that's kind of where the position that you're in now, right? You mentioned that you've now moved into a different house hack,
Mhm.
right? So kind of walk us through that, right? Because that's what people when they think of house hacking, that's kind of progression, right? They house hack one property to another, and then at the end of it, they accumulate their portfolio. So how's that journey been for you? How long did it take you to move into your second house hack? And is that to progression you're going to make continuing moving forward as well?
Yeah, so I was in that first house hack just over a year. And then around probably like 14 months in, I started to look for house hack in number two because I was able to increase the rents and decrease my expenses in that first one, where towards the end I was living for free and getting paid a little bit to actually live there. So my savings rate was huge. So then about in March of this year, I closed on a triplex, not too far from where my first one was. And in this one, it's a single family kind of in the front, and then an up down duplex in the back. And I'm taking the worst unit. It's I say worst, but it's really even not that bad. Just needs some slight paint love. And I'm thinking of getting a roommate actually, and then my mortgage would be paid for again.
Yeah. So that's the cool part about house hacking, right? Is that you're not just kind of building the accumulation of wealth through the property that you're owning, but you're also saving
Yeah.
on living costs, right? You don't have to pay rent or you don't have to pay a mortgage. You're basically your living cost, the biggest expense for most people is paid for while you're also accumulating properties.
And because my first house hack was so extreme, this one feels like luxury. I'm like, wow, I have a full kitchen, full fridge. Wow. And I can wash my clothes in my own unit, right? And so sometimes when you start off in such a rough spot, the next one seems so much nicer just because of comparison, you know?
Yeah, that's it's a very good point, right? Because a lot of people they've always been kind of living, great, right? If you will, it could be a big shock to them, right? If they end up having their living conditions be reduced a little bit, if you will. But because you started out the way that you did, anything that you kind of layer up, it's gonna seem like you mentioned, like luxury, right? You're gonna be
Yeah.
grateful for every upgrade that you make as you continue to accumulate properties and continue to house hack as
Mhm.
well. So is that kind of what you're trying to do next as well? After this one, you're going to house hack another one, or are you going to plan on staying in the current one you're in and just kind of buy rental properties that you own?
Yeah, I'm in the process of kind of building the reserves now because most of the lenders require you to have 6 months of reserves. So that's kind of the building process that I'm in now. And I will house hack a third one. And then I bounce back and forth between continuing the house hack and trying to beat, like the records. I think the highest person I've heard so far is like at 9 or 10 or something crazy like that. But I'm also in the process of trying to learn other ways of investing that don't require a lot down. I've been really focusing on like seller financing in the creative space and figuring out, okay, how can I put about the same amount of cash down or raise funds to structure deals that I don't have to live in.
Right. That's really interesting, right? Because most people when they think of house hacking, like you said, right, they go like 9 or 10 and just keep house hacking over and over again. But you're kind of exploring different ways to continuing to invest in real estate, which is great, right? Because eventually you want to get to a point. I think most people do, where they just kind of retire off of their rental portfolio, and that's mostly the goal for a lot of people. And kind of shifting back a little bit, something else I really kind of want to get your take on when it comes to house hacking, and this is something I think I asked maybe in different podcasts that you did was the tenant screening process, right?
Oh, yeah.
For a lot of people, the biggest concern they have is like safety issues living with like a tenant who
Mm.
may or may not know you're also the landlord and may
Yeah.
or may not have attitudes towards that as well. So when it comes to the tenant screening process, is there different safety measures that you can take because you're also living in that property versus if you just own a property that you didn't live in?
Yeah, although I also will say that I'm a above average size guy. About 6'2", about 280. I played college football, so I'm also not oblivious to the fact that I'm larger than most of the people that I interact with. So that could also change my judgment a little bit too. But when people ask me about living with their tenants, I often ask them, "Well, have you ever lived in apartments, or do you have neighbors?" And then most people will say yes. I'm like, okay, do you know their background? Most people will say no, right? And so I'm just like, you're living by people that you don't know. Whereas at least when you screen for your tenants, you get their background. You get the background check to confirm um, criminal background, eviction history, their credit score. I also look them up online as well, like Facebook or Instagram, because most people that rent my units tend to be in the social media age. And so I can find them somewhere, right? And it's just kind of another character check. And I've really been fortunate that all the tenants that I've placed have renewed their lease. I've only had one tenant break their lease, and I don't even really blame them. They worked in law enforcement, and they were actually investigating a neighbor. So for their safety, they had to move. And so you no matter what screening process that you do, you're not going to find that one.
Yeah, that's a I think that's a rare case, right? That's a
Yeah.
unique case. And it wasn't like their fault, right? Because
No.
the other follow-up question that I had was like, did you ever have to evict a tenant and maybe how that process might go if you were, kind of living in the same unit as them or the same property, but you had to evict them, kind of creates a weird situation.
No, knock on wood, I've never really had to do that. My screening criteria is kind of high. I look for a credit score of over 700 and no previous evictions. I don't put a income requirement. The reason being is because that takes away from people that earn tips,
Mm,
right? And so if you put that and someone earns a good amount of money through their tips, they're not going to be able to qualify, right? So I still want those type of people to apply, but for them, I may ask for, oh, can you show me like a bank statement that shows a history of the deposits? But if you just put the three times the rent, those people may not apply because of their line of work.
mm. That's something that I don't think people think about, right? Because especially if you're renting out to like people who are going to be living with you in the type of units, right? For house hacking, right? These are also going to be people who are, like you mentioned, probably in the social media age, probably looking to save a little bit, right? When it comes to their living costs as well. And some of these people work in the service industry where the income statements may not be able to show what they're actually able to afford as well. So that's interesting that you're kind of opening up the market that way by actually removing that requirement. But yeah, man. So I kind of wanted to maybe shift topics here a little bit, like we mentioned earlier in the show, and want to get your experience on being a teacher as well, because you are heavily in the financial education space, right? You're creating your own content. You're part of a community that also create has their own content as well, and I'm sure you listen to a lot of content around financial education, or else you wouldn't be doing the things that you're doing today. But you're also in the traditional education space. Are you seeing the gaps that I think a lot of people are saying that they're seeing, being somebody who is actually working in this industry day to day, but also knowing what's being taught in the financial education space as well?
Yes and no. I think when some people complain about the education system, I wonder how involved they actually are, because change is slow. It's like trying to turn like this giant cruise ship. Like it takes a while to get it there. Whereas on YouTube, it's more like a speedboat. That thing, right? Like it can change very fast. And so there definitely are gaps though. But the good news is that people that work in education are aware. And at least in the area that I'm in, we are trying to push it so that way all high school kids will at least have to take a financial education course before they uh, graduate. Not all the districts have implemented that yet. A few in my area have. My district has not implemented it yet, but it's kind of in the works. Part of the reason it's kind of slow is because you got to figure out who's going to teach it, right? What are they going to teach? Because there's lots of ways of thinking. There's the Dave Ramsey. There's like investor thinking, right? So there's different ways. So those decisions, unfortunately, with the government involved, take a long time.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people have reflected as far as their feedback as well is, trying to change something that's been established for as long as it has.
Mhm.
It's going to take a lot of time. I love the analogy that you gave, right? It's like trying to steer a giant cruise ship, right? Right? It takes a while to get all that mass over to another direction. But that's interesting, right? So you mentioned one of the problems there is the curriculum. Is that something that you mentioned you were kind of involved in this. Is that something you're involved in designing as well as a curriculum, maybe around just simple strategies for not necessarily, becoming like a serial investor right out of high
Mhm.
school, but just understanding that you should also save and invest and build wealth, and there's something as such as passive income. Um,
Yeah, I've shared my opinion. I'm not on like committees or teams that really do that. Another conception is that people that are on committees, like I thought when I was in college, I'm like, oh, if I'm more involved with the district, you're compensated. That's not necessarily the case. A lot of labor and education is actually just from people giving their time away. And that's awesome for the people that can afford to do that. I'm really can't, right? I'm trying to build my YouTube. I have a private football coaching business. I do trying to acquire more properties, right? So I don't really have the time to join these committees and offer free time or free like labor to help build the curriculum. When asked, I'll definitely help. But that's kind of the sad reality is a lot of the people that are involved are giving time away for free.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point as well because you mentioned that what you're doing, right? You're focusing on building your channel
Mm.
and, acquiring properties for yourself. But when you're doing with like your YouTube channel, currently kind of what you're doing here as well is you're creating education for people that might be interested in building wealth and investing, but through a different medium, right? So do
Mhm.
you think now that with everything going on social media and the accessibility of information, that's actually maybe a better use of your time if you want to make an impact or make a change rather than trying to change the established school district and the curriculums and however long that takes.
Yes and no, because I think our students sometimes don't know what they don't know, right? And so they may not even know that they're interested in financial stuff because they never even heard of it. In the area that I teach in, there's a lot of Title One schools, which means that there's a lot of poverty in the area. Like our whole school gets free and reduced lunch. Not reduced, but it's all free. Breakfast is free, lunch is free, just because our poverty level is so high, right? And so I know they're not getting the financial education that they need at home. So I'm like, well, where else are they going to be exposed to it if they don't find it on YouTube? So I think it's great. Districts are trying to implement it into the curriculum. I'm trying to do my part on building the a YouTube that kids actually can watch. Um, but I think there has to be like definitely like a balance. But if kids are only at school for 8 hours, that means 16 of the hours are away from here. So I almost wish that we'd do like more family nights to get like families involved. Because if we can get the conversations happening at home, I think that'd have more of an impact than necessarily at school.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think, there's so much that kids don't know. So I'm younger as well. Graduated high school back in 2019, whatever you might be watching this video, um but I didn't know what passive income was. I did not know that term. I didn't understand the concept until I graduated and picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which, I'm not going to tell the whole story here, but it's pretty much like on an accident almost. I just kind of came across it. So I do think that's not necessarily like an issue, but I think a lot of people could, maybe not reach their potential if they didn't have an opportunity to do that as well. If they didn't get that education, that basic concept of, hey, it's possible to earn an income this way, as well as, trading your time for it.
Yeah, and a few of the kids know. So I've told a few kids because they ask me, oh, so what do you do when you're not at here? Because we know you're humans. So what do you do outside of school? So then I'll tell them, and not all the kids are interested. But last year I was playing a YouTube clip. We were talking about some drug or alcohol clip, and the clip ends right, and then it shows you the related videos or like the videos that you may like. Well, then my face popped up on some interview or podcast I did, and the whole class freaked out. They're like, "What are you doing up there?" And then it was cool to kind of spark the conversation of things I do outside of just teach. And a few of the kids like, "Oh wow, so you're rich?" I'm like, "No, no, I'm not rich yet."
Nice. I like that. Yeah, because when people see it, right, you see that you're out there, they get more interested. And people have ideas of like what real estate investing and what it is. And then I think you can give them more of a kind of a realistic take on what it takes and what the sacrifices it takes to be able to invest in real estate and why it's worth it as well. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you next was that, is that something you're kind of incorporating in your conversations with your students and with the student athletes that you're coaching as well, because we know that you're really passionate about building wealth, not just for yourself, but also creating content. So, is that something that you try to incorporate or if you find somebody who is, is in your class or your training that is interested, you try to kind of spark more conversations in and around that, just to kind of change people's perspectives one person at a time.
Yeah, and so I'll start with the students first. So there's a few kids like they'll get done with my classwork and then I'll hear them talking like, gosh, I just hate math or what's the point of math? And then I'm like, oh, perfect opportunity. I'm like, well, that equation that you're doing right there? Well, I do math every day. And they're like, wait, what? You're a health teacher. Why are you doing math? I'm like, well, I buy houses. And we can kind of get the conversation going. I'm like, yeah, man, that algebra that you're doing, you're trying to find X, or you're trying to work through it. I do that every day to buy houses. And then that sparks the whole housing conversation. Well, how do you do that? So you're rich now. Why are you working? Right. And so it sparks all of these conversations. And then they realize, oh, I should probably do my math homework. So that part's been kind of cool to see the links there. And then as far as the athletes go, is that there are times, and maybe at practice, um, that I get a phone call. I say, hey, I have to step away. Or they're like, oh, well, what's your plans after the game or after during like the weekend? And I can tell them, oh, I'm going to this event or I'm working on this project. And they're like, wait, what? And then I could get to tell them, and it's been really cool to kind of see them like get more curious and start asking me things, maybe even unprompt.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that, right? You're also, you're kind of helping the other teachers almost, right? Getting them to do their math homework,
Yeah.
right? But kind of showing them a different path. And I think that comes down to motivation. And that's something else that I'm very curious on your take about as well, because you are a coach, right?
Mhm.
And you have to find ways to motivate people who may or may not be motivated. And I've been there as well, not too long ago. We know that kind of kids and teenagers are not easily motivated to do certain things. So, what are some of the strategies that you have to motivate people, people on your team, people that you're teaching?
Mhm.
You gave us one example, which is awesome, but is there any other strategies or ways that you're trying to motivate others to
Yeah,
reach your full potential?
the athletes way easier to motivate. It's like night and day, like because the athletes they want to play in the games, they want to do better. I teach and coach mostly at the junior high, so but they know that I've coached at a high school, I've coached at the college level as well, and so I tell them, hey, like these behaviors are what the high school coach wants. Or if I'm working with the high school kid, hey, if you want to play in college, this is kind of what it takes, and we can have that conversation. So they're way easier to motivate because they all just want to play, right? And then the students, that's a whole different challenge. Like I think I could work in sales now that I've dealt with preteen hormones because these people drive a hard bargain, man. And so the whole first part of this school year, you're just trying to figure these kids out. Okay, what do they like? Okay, who do they want to sit by? What actually gets them engaged in the stuff? And that is an uphill battle, and sometimes it's give and take, and it's just knowing them. Like it's really relationship based, in which kind of is interesting because so is real estate. And so it's interesting that I've kind of found two careers or two and niches that really focus on the relationship first.
Yeah. And I love that you're doing that, right? Because we know like not everybody in education takes the time and the effort to be able to build, relationships with their students and
Mhm.
try to understand them and try to have them engage in the material that you're trying to teach as well. And that's the biggest, I think the biggest difference maker as well. And you can speak on that too, is if somebody is not motivated, if they're not engaged and they're not finding value in
Mhm.
a task, then they're not going to do it, right? It's very similar to how you found value in sacrificing maybe lifestyle, but for house hacking, right? Because that's going to help you accumulate wealth later.
Yeah. So for the house hacking part, so I'm not sure if you know Dion from Dion Talk, but he actually is in my area, and so I saw the life he was living, and he said, "Hey, yeah, if you do that." then you'll get this. I'm like, okay, well, let me just buckle up my bootstraps and let me do this house hacking thing. And so sometimes with the students, the content, not always the most maybe exciting thing or the thing that they want to do in the moment, but relating it somehow or some way to something that you know that they like, or something that they've experienced or heard about, definitely gets more of that engagement.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's great that you're doing that, man. I really, I think props to you for being able to do that and also being able to kind of set the example as well for your students by kind of going out there and actually living the life of building wealth while also working a job and not be, not having to sacrifice one or the other. So that's awesome, man. And I appreciate you being on the show today. I think you shared with us a ton of value just on your journey, but also some of the things that you're doing and trying to get involved in with financial education. So for people who are out there that are watching this or listening to this that want to learn more about you, I know you share your journey kind of live time on your channel. So what are some of the best ways for people to actually reach out to you or to kind of follow you and just see your content and to continue following your journey as well?
Yeah, if you want to kind of just watch along, you can find me PE turned RE here on YouTube. If you want to message me, DM me about house hacking or investing or education, sports, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, PE turned RE there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to leave the links to that in the description down below so that's easy for people to find. But Curtis, man, appreciate you being on the show today. Before we let you go, is there any last pieces of advice, any last tips you want to kind of leave with us here before I let you sign off?
Yes, please find the meetups in your area. And if there's none, join the ORAC community so that way you can join us virtually. Because the more you can get around people that are trying to win and better their lives, your life will also improve too.
Awesome, man. That's some great advice. Hey, appreciate you being here today. Appreciate you all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show. Take care.